When you start your career in management consulting, you have two options. You could be a generalist consultant or you could be a specialist consultant. But which one is better? In this video, I'm going to answer the most common questions that I get asked about the differences between the two roles and knowing which one is the right one for your career. Question number one is, what do consultants from each group actually do? A generalist consultant is someone who doesn't specialize in any one field. For example, you might work with a VR company one month to help them launch their new product, and then the following month, help a textile manufacturing company figure out where their next factory should be located. You can think of a generalist consultant as a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife, like a generalist, is very versatile and has the tools equipped to handle a wide range of different tasks and situations where you need a little bit of everything. For a long time, when the field of management consulting actually came to be created, consultants were almost exclusively generalists. There were people who were just smart, all-around problem solvers who could function like a Swiss Army knife and do a little bit of everything because you didn't know what you would be expecting from the projects you would work on. But as the business world became more sophisticated and consulting firms became more abundant, this crowded out a lot of generalist consultants. And consulting firms needed a way to stand out. So they created specialized teams that would allow them to have deep knowledge into one particular industry or one particular function. For example, this is similar to how you have a specialized coach for each event at the Olympics. Each consulting firms wanted to prove that they had a specialized knowledge in a particular domain. And this is how they could demonstrate for clients who had specialized needs that they had the functions or the expertise to help that client out. So consulting firms could have a team of consultants who have an engineering background and focus on oil and gas industry, or a team of healthcare experts who work with biotech companies. If generalist consultants are like Swiss Army knives, then specialist consultants are more like scalpels. They're designed with one particular function in mind, but they do that one function really well. And while you could still use a scalpel to open, for example, a bottle, it's not the best use of their particular purpose. Just like a specialist consultant in their niche area could consult in other areas, it's not the best use of their knowledge. Nowadays, you find consulting firms fall into one of two camps. Before, it would be just generalists with just generalist consultants. Now it's generalist firms with specialized teams, or firms that are completely specialized. The second question I get asked is the hiring process different for generalists versus specialists? The recruiting process is actually very similar between generalists and specialists. So it comes down to these three steps. First, you apply. Second, you might be asked to take some online assessments. And third, you do the live interviews. The difference is that someone who's applying for a specialist role will also have to demonstrate they have the industry expertise or functional expertise, that is, prior knowledge about that industry, that specialist role they're going to, or if it's an entry-level role on a specialist team, at least demonstrate that you have a history of it. And that's because specialized firms want to know where you're going and that you're going to be committed to the line of work that they do, because it doesn't make sense for especially entry roles where they'll train you up and then you leave a couple months later because you realize, oh, you're not actually interested in this line of work. And the one way that firms will test your knowledge as well as interest for the particular specialty is through the case interviews. If you're applying for a generalist role, you'll be asked a lot of wide range of case interview questions. But if you're applying for a specialist role, such as, for example, healthcare consulting, you're more likely to encounter healthcare cases. But again, that's not always true because some interviewers at specialized firms or even specialized teams want to know that their specialists are able to still have a general core overall business sense. So here's my advice for you. If you're applying for a generalist track or a specialty track, you should practice a wide variety of cases to make sure that you're well versed in it. But if you're applying for a specialist role in particular, you also need to layer on cases in the field that you're applying to. So for example, if you're applying for an implementation team, make sure to practice some implementation cases as well. In short, the preparation time that you should spend as a specialist role should be more than what you apply to as a generalist. The third most common question I get asked is, what does the career progression look like? For specialist consultants, the titles might have different names, but they're essentially the same as in generalist consultants. And the end goal is the same too, which is to make partner at the firm that you're working at, if you decide to stay until partner. To give you an example, at Bain, as a generalist, you would start as an associate consultant, work your way up to senior associate consultant, then work your way up to consultant, manager, senior manager, associate partner, and then partner. While on the specialist track, you would start off as an expert, sometimes called specialist associate consultant, then become an expert consultant, then become an expert manager, then an expert senior manager, then an expert associate partner, and then an expert partner. So you can see there, the path is very similar, but the titles might change from firm to firm. The fourth question I get asked is performance evaluated in the same way? So this will vary depending on the firm, but in general, generalists have what are called an up or out policy, where they may be asked to leave if their performance doesn't meet the standard for promotion. Specialist consultants, on the other hand, are given more time and space to progress. This is because firms realize that because you're coming in with a specialty, it might take you time to develop the general business sense or to get a deep knowledge of your specialty if you're starting off, for example, at an entry-level role. So you get more leeway as a specialist consultant in general than you do as a generalist. The fifth question I get asked is about compensation. Who earns more? Your actual pay will come down to the firm, the location, and the role. But in general, you can think of it like this. Assuming similar locations and similar roles, who do you think earns the most? The answer is specialist. Now, I want to ask you, who earns the least? The answer is also specialist, with generalist in the middle. Wait, so how can this be? To understand the why behind this, you need to know for specialists, there are two types of specialists. There are specialists where the client's willing to pay more, and those where the client's not willing to pay more. So let's start with the high end of the scale. Imagine a team of specialists who work with oil companies in two things. One, focusing on preventing oil spills, and two, ensuring safety at drilling sites. The stakes in such scenarios are incredibly high because a mistake could lead to environmental disasters or even worse, loss of lives. Consequentially, the expertise here is often type invaluable because of the risk that they take to protect the company and how rare this expertise is to find. So their compensation, that is because the client, if they mess up and hire the wrong consultants, have to pay a much higher price, and there's not many consultants in that field. So these specialist consultants not only bring in specialized knowledge, but they also provide solutions to prevent multi-million-dollar catastrophes. So in such fields where the cost of getting something wrong is astronomical, specialists can command a very high compensation. On the other end of the spectrum, you can consider specialists who work as consultants, for example, with nonprofit organizations. Here, the situation is a lot different. Nonprofits typically operate with limited budgets, and their ability to pay high consulting fees is often constrained. So therefore, specialists in this sector might be passionate about social causes, and their work is undoubtedly impactful as well as valuable, but the financial compensation they receive is relatively low. This is not because their expertise is less valued, but because their clients, the nonprofits, have limited financial resources. And that's how you get that some specialists are paid on average more than generalists, while other specialists are paid less than generalists. The sixth question I get asked is, what does work-life balance look like between the two roles? So work-life balance in consulting in general is not going to be your standard 40-hour work week. And if you're looking for a standard 40-hour work week where everything's the same and you know where you need to be, then you shouldn't consider consulting at all, whether it's specialist or generalist consulting. But if you're ready to work more than 40 hours a week sometimes when needed, then the differences between the roles are as follows. As a generalist, you're going to have a lot more variability in your project than you would as a specialist. For a generalist, it's going to depend on a few things. First, it's going to depend on the length of the project. Second, it's going to depend on the demand of the client. And third, it's going to depend on the leadership team. So for example, if you're working on a strategy project that gives you 6 months versus 6 weeks, you're going to be working a lot harder on the 6-week project on average just because there's less time. Second is demand of the client. The client is used to working on demands of the firms, and you can kind of predict what the hours will be like. Or if you're working with a demanding client who's trying to get as much out of the engagement as possible, then you might be working overtime. And the leadership team also varies. If the leadership team has a good relationship with the client, then you can expect that the project scope is going to be a lot more defined versus a leadership team who's new to a client and trying to sell more projects and trying to over-deliver and over-impress. You're probably going to end up working a lot more hours. I've dealt with that multiple times myself. And if you're a specialist, your hours will also vary similarly to a generalist, but it tends to be less variable. That's because specialists have clearer roles on the project, and therefore your schedules are a lot more structured and a lot more relaxed. So as a whole, specialists on average have more consistent schedules, that is less variability in hours, but it doesn't necessarily mean lower hours. So for example, you could be a specialist in private equity consulting, which means higher hours on average than other specialties because of the shorter project times and higher client demands. But at least you know that the hours will be high and will be consistent there. The next question I get asked is, what does the exit opportunities look like for generalists versus specialists? For specialists, your future path tends to align closely with your area of expertise. For example, if you've been a digital consultant at McKinsey, your next steps are likely within the digital realm. This could mean taking on roles that leverage your digital expertise or even starting your own venture in the digital field. On the other hand, generalists often find themselves with a wider variety of options. Their roles are often around high-level strategy decision-making thanks to their wide-ranging experience. So as a generalist, you might find yourself in a position as a CEO of a manufacturing company, even if you didn't specialize in manufacturing during your time in consulting. In such a role, you might not have deep expertise, for example, on a manufacturing supply chain, but your broad understanding of business and what a supply chain is allows you to grasp the bigger picture and make strategic decisions that will move the company forward. In short, as a specialist, you're more likely to stay within your realm, while if you're a generalist, you tend to go into more strategic high-level positions. So then that leaves the final question, which is it better for you to be a generalist or a specialist? To answer this question, I want you to ask yourself another question. Why do I want to become a consultant? If you already have a clear vision for a particular career path in your career and you're using consulting as a way to gain experience in that particular path, then a specialist track will be right for you. For example, let's say that you already know you want to be in private equity. Then you'll either want to be working at a generalist firm that is known for private equity projects, such as Bain, or a specialist firm that specializes in working with private equity firms, like 𝗢𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗲𝗄. That way, you can specialize early and gain that expertise. Specializing early will give you a fast track towards your expertise and build you a reputation that will make it easier for you to transition to the career that you want to have after consulting. The same thinking also applies if you're someone with substantial industry experience and your goal is to climb the ladder within a consulting firm. That is, you want to be able to make partner, for example, at a firm. In this case, specializing is again a smarter choice. It allows you to leverage your prior experience, build on top of it, and position yourself as an expert, because specializing then becomes the path towards your goal of making it your partner at the firm. For those reasons, specializing is a lot better. However, if you're still exploring your options or you're considering a career shift entirely, starting as a generalist could be more beneficial. It's like a rotational program. You get to spend time in various industries and functions, which can not only be valuable for figuring out what resonates with you, but being able to build out a generalized toolkit. Plus, you can always have the option to specialize later if you found a niche that you really enjoy. If you take this path, my recommendation is that you go with a firm that will allow you to work on a variety of projects in a short period of time to get different exposures to different industries. This is one of my reasons why I wanted to work at 𝗍𝗃, because I knew 𝗍𝗃 typically took on shorter projects. So for example, even when I was in the private equity group at 𝗍𝗃, each of these projects would on average last about 2 weeks. So I got a chance to explore different industries, everything from pet products to software. And this allowed me to build a wide skill set that I eventually leveraged to start my own company. So a lot of different ways that you can think about it as a generalist. To sum it up, the decision to be a generalist or a specialist within consulting really comes down to where you want to see your career going and how you see your time in consulting contributing to that career path. So now that you know the differences between being a generalist and being a specialist, I'm curious, which of the two paths is more appealing to you? Is it being a generalist or a specialist? And which firm are you thinking about applying to? In fact, if you comment below whether or not you want to be a generalist and specialist and which firm you want to apply to, I want to give you some free additional resources to help you land that interview and land that offer for the position that you're applying to. For example, if you put 𝗢𝗻𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏, then I'll send you some resources to help you land your offer at 𝗢𝗻𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. And if you're 100% serious about a career in management consulting, whether it's a generalist or specialist role, I have a second resource I want to give you for free. Recently, we put together a free training where we walk you through step by step how you can land your interviews, how you pass your interviews, and ultimately get that offer in consulting. I'm actually going to leave a link in the comments where you can access the training for free. So all you have to do is click the link below, access the training, and be one step closer to landing your consulting offer. But you don't take my word for it. Hear from 𝗍𝗃, who came from an oil and gas background, but wanted to make a career change. So he applied to McKinsey as a generalist, and after going through the training, ended up landing his offer at McKinsey. I'll link to his video above my head so you can find that, and I'll also link to the free training below, and I'm so excited to see where you end up. All right, I'll see you in the next video.